A nun faked her death to escape her convent. Sandwiches caused a prison riot. And this German supermarket is selling gendered sausages. Some of these facts sound made up, but trust me, they are all completely real. I'm Mike with List 25, and today I'm counting down 25 real facts that sound like tall tales. Starting with a man who once used prostitutes and priests to steal boats for a living. Let's get into it. Max Hardberger isn't your average repo guy. He specializes in recovering ships from some of the world's sketchiest ports, and his methods are, well, let's just say, creative. During Haiti's 2004 rebellion, Hardberger snuck a 10,000-ton cargo vessel out of port using Voodoo. Yeah, really. He hired a local priest to stage a ritual that spooked the crew enough to abandon ship. He also likes to use another tactic: prostitutes. According to Hardberger, they're great actresses. He sends them aboard posing as romantic flings to gather info. How many guards, how much fuel, what's working and what's not. Then he plans the heist. It's bizarre, but weirdly effective. Okay, let's swap Voodoo for office drama. In 2012, Greg Smith, the former Goldman Sachs executive, decided that he had had enough. But instead of the usual "thanks for the opportunity" email, he quit with a full-blown op-ed in the New York Times. In it, he claimed the company had lost its moral compass and was all about profits over people. Naturally, the piece exploded. Some praised him as a whistleblower, others called him self-righteous. Either way, it worked out. He got a $1 million book deal and rode that exit into a whole new career. Now for a feline who made the mob nervous. A few years ago, a Siamese cat named Rusik wandered into a checkpoint in Stavropol and somehow landed himself a job. When he jumped in the trunk of a car and immediately sniffed out a hidden stash of sturgeon, officers realized they had something special. Rusik was soon working full-time, rooting out smugglers carrying illegal Caspian Sea caviar, better than any sniffer dog on the team. But the job was dangerous. Less than a year in, Rusik was killed by a car that just so happened to belong to a known smuggler. Was it an accident? Who knows? According to those in the know, the fact of the matter was that the Mafia didn't like being upstaged by a cat. Time to jump from smugglers to spiders. Fossilized ones. With glowing eyes. When paleontologists started digging through shale in South Korea in 2019, they weren't expecting glow-in-the-dark spiders. Usually spiders break down too fast to leave a trace, unless they're trapped in amber. But this time the spiders weren't only preserved, 2 of them came with something extra: eyes that still glittered. As it turns out, they were preserved with their tapetum intact, mirror-like structures inside their eyes that help them see in the dark. Scientists had never seen these in the fossil record before, so this discovery was huge and strangely beautiful. The only question that remains is how these arachnids and their night vision gear managed to get fossilized in the first place. Glowy-eyed fossils aside, did you know that the CIA once tried to stealth a spy plane with beads and glue? In the 50s, the CIA realized their fancy new U-2 spy planes weren't exactly invisible. Soviet radar could track them just fine. So they launched Project Rainbow to make the aircraft stealthier. Their approaches were quite innovative. One method involved stringing a wire of iron beads around the entire plane using bamboo poles, based on the idea that the wire would trap radar waves. Another attempt involved gluing specific plastic tiles to the plane's surface. Both ideas flopped. One made the plane unstable. The other, well, it did nothing. And Project Rainbow quietly fizzled out a year later. Of course, not every bold idea involved spy planes. Some involve leather underwear. Like the ones the Warriors wore in the movie 300. Yep, you can now own a pair of the Spartan style undies modeled after the armor that made Jared Butler's abs the most talked about thing in 2007. They're made of actual leather, shaped like battle gear, and they're very much a fashion statement. Just not the kind anyone asked for. Even though they're produced by museum replicas as a gag fashion item, the brand insists it's about channeling strength, discipline, and ancient warrior spirit. Yeah, sure, or maybe it's just about strutting around in a leather thong and seeing who blinks first. Either way, these things exist, they're for sale, and someone out there has absolutely worn them to the bedroom. Possibly while yelling, "This is Sparta!" But weird gets weirder when drywall becomes dinner. Patrice from southeast London has a rare eating disorder called pica, which causes people to crave non-food items. Her favorite? Brick and plaster. She describes the taste as chalky, crunchy, and almost sweet, like a little treat. She's been eating walls for years now, even making weekly trips to her grandmother's house just to scoop chunks from the brickwork she grew up with. For Patrice, it's not just a craving, it's a connection to home, one that she actually describes as a comfort blanket. Her husband only found out about her disorder by accident, walking in to find her mid-chew, brick dust on her face, and a screwdriver in hand. But he's as supportive as he can be, given the circumstances. And now for a sausage story that somehow turned into a culture war. What's the difference between a male and female sausage? Well, apparently enough to cause a controversy. In the early 2010s, the Edeka supermarket chain in Germany launched a line of male and female sausages. The Männer, yes, that's male, variety is thick and hefty, while the Frauen, or female version, is slimmer, more expensive, and, according to the packaging, made with higher quality meat. Critics weren't amused. Political scientist Antje Schrupp called it thoughtless, normative sexism, arguing that it reinforces gender roles through food. Journalist Suzanne Entz added that it implies women should be dainty and decorative, while men get to indulge. Others rolled their eyes and said, well, just buy the big one. Then again, if you're going to rebel against society, why stop at sausages? Why not secretly build an entire house inside your garage? In 2018, inspectors in Enderby, Leicestershire discovered that a couple had secretly converted their garage into a fully livable home, complete with a front door, and then tried to hide it behind a tall wooden fence. Rita Harzala and Hamdi Al-Masri claimed they weren't trying to deceive anyone, just following advice from a builder who said it was totally fine. The illegal setup also included a hidden entry onto a dual carriageway and violated off-street parking regulations. So Blaby District Council told them to tear it all down. They didn't, and they also didn't show up in court. So the couple was fined, and from what we can gather, the council ultimately ensured that the garage was restored to its original use. I've covered questionable homes. Now let's meet the historical figures who would have bolted from those homes, if a cat walked in. You'd expect tyrants, warlords, and emperors to have a wide range of valid fears. Maybe poison, betrayal, or assassination. But for some of history's most powerful figures, it was cats. Allophobia, the irrational fear of cats, reportedly plagued everyone from Alexander the Great to Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Julius Caesar, Hitler, Mussolini, and even US President Dwight D. Eisenhower, also apparently all deeply uncomfortable around felines. Napoleon was said to panic if one even entered the room. Shakespeare and ballet legend Isadora Duncan weren't spared either. So maybe ruling the world and dealing with cats just doesn't mix. Or maybe these guys just instinctively knew cats don't take orders from anyone. Also in anime, there's Ranma. But on the bright side, at least cats don't leak nuclear waste. Hopefully. In 2016, NASA scientist Chad Green was flying over Greenland when he snapped what looked like a totally normal photo. But then the plane's radar picked up something strange beneath the ice, and that blip turned out to be anything but ordinary. What they'd accidentally discovered was Camp Century, a massive Cold War-era US military base buried 100 feet down. Built in 1959 without Denmark fully informed about the plan, it was meant to house nuclear missiles pointed straight at the Soviet Union. The whole thing was shut down when the ice proved unstable, but the site was never cleaned up. Now, with climate change melting the ice, the long-forgotten base is thawing, along with the nuclear waste and diesel fuel still sitting there. And, well, we're all hoping it stays there. Luckily, not every weird discovery is buried in ice. You also have ones that involve pig butts and tubing. In a genuinely strange experiment, scientists discovered that pigs can absorb oxygen through their intestines. Even stranger is that it's being touted as a potential medical breakthrough. The idea came from researcher Takanori Takebe, who was looking for alternatives to ventilators, which can sometimes damage lung tissue. So he and his team flushed an oxygen-rich liquid called perfluorocarbon into pigs' rear ends and watched their oxygen levels go up. It worked. Repeatedly. The method could be used in places where ventilators aren't always available, and since perfluorocarbon is already used for premature babies' lungs, well, the risks are low. Still, this pig is breathing through its butt? is not exactly the kind of sentence you expect to hear when it comes to scientific discoveries. Moving on, we're about to go from pigs to piety. During the Middle Ages, convents were often the only option for women, especially young girls, to survive in a society with limited choices. At the very least, they provided food and shelter. But for Joan of Leeds, the monastic life was clearly not it. To get out, she staged her own death using a fake body and a sham burial, then slipped away from the house of St. Clement by York. Archbishop William Melton had no clue what pushed her to run, but in a letter, he guessed it was some mix of scandal, seduction, and carnal lust. No one really knows what happened to Joan after that, or what drove her to such a bold escape. And speaking of carnal lust, did you know San Francisco was home to a so-called wellness group that built an entire business around orgasm-based meditation? It was called One Taste, and the idea was to practice mindful partnered meditation through the female orgasm. But beneath the feel-good branding, things got a lot darker. In 2023, founder Nicole Dayton and former sales director Rachel Cherwitz were indicted on forced labor charges. Prosecutors say they pressured members into taking on massive debt to pay for their courses, then used that financial grip to control their lives. The FBI claims they specifically targeted people with trauma, encouraged sexual acts in the name of enlightenment, and created an environment that felt a whole lot more like a cult than a wellness retreat. Unfortunately, questionable judgment isn't limited to cult leaders. It also shows up at airport check-ins. Airlines have had to deal with the rising trend of emotional support animals for years. From pigs to turkeys to ducks, all with a doctor's note in hand. But in 2018, United Airlines finally drew the line. A performance artist showed up at Newark Airport with a full-sized peacock, insisting she couldn't fly without it. The bird even had its own ticket. United said no. She was denied boarding, and the peacock, tail feathers and all, was turned away. Which brings us to the guy who went diving for fish and came back thinking he discovered a UFO. While diving off the coast of British Columbia in 2016, Sean Smirachinski came across something that looked way too symmetrical to be natural. So his first thought was aliens. I mean, what else? But as it turns out, the object was most likely a broken arrow, military code for lost nuclear weapon. Back in 1950, a US B-36 bomber crashed in the area during a training flight. Before it went down, the crew reportedly ditched a Mark IV bomb, a 10-foot-long, 5-ton nuke-shaped dummy filled with lead instead of plutonium. It was never recovered, until possibly now. The Canadian Navy said they'd investigate and decided whether to retrieve it. Whether it really was the lost bomb or just a very convincing lookalike, we still don't know. No one ever followed up after the story broke. Anyway, not every crisis starts with weapons. Some start with sandwiches. In October 2002, inmates at HMP Lincoln were expecting a hot meal. Instead, they were handed cold sandwiches, and they did not take it well. Furious over the menu change, a group of prisoners attacked a guard, stole his keys, and began unlocking cells. What followed was a full-scale riot. Inmates flooded the prison, and it took 550 officers nearly 8 hours to regain control. By the end, 35 people were injured, 1 inmate had died of a drug overdose, and the damage cost over £3 million. The strangest part about this story is that it wasn't the only time sandwiches led to a prison riot. In 2013, 12 people were injured after a fight over grilled cheese at Rikers Island. However, not all strange reactions involve sandwiches. You know how Dolores Umbridge made Harry write lines with that cursed quill that carved words into his hand? Well, real life has something almost as weird. It's called dermatographism, or skin writing, and people who have it can quite literally draw on themselves with just a bit of pressure. Scratch or press down on the skin, and it'll raise up in pale or red welts, spelling out whatever shape or word you traced. Some people even use it to make temporary body art. The reaction usually fades in about 30 minutes and isn't dangerous, just itchy and odd. Scientists think it may be caused by histamines that get released when the skin is irritated. Alright, it's time to mix science with a bit of nerdiness and a splash of pop culture. There's always been overlap between science and nerd culture. The two kind of feed off each other. Maybe it's because scientists spend so much time thinking about how the world works, and nerds spend just as much time building worlds from scratch. It's a good match. But it's not always the science that comes first. Sometimes it's the fandom that leads the way. Take Lucy, for example, one of the most famous fossils ever found. In 1974, Donald Johnson and Tom Gray uncovered her remains in Hadar, Ethiopia. She was an Australopithecus afarensis who lived around 3.2 million years ago and had the curved spine, pelvis, and knees to prove she walked upright. So, what makes that discovery a little nerdy? Well, that night the team was celebrating and someone had Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds playing on repeat. Nobody remembers exactly who said it first, but the name stuck. And just like that, one of our oldest ancestors was named after a Beatles track. Meanwhile, back in the 2000s, a school drop-off turned into an erasing act. Brenda Heist had just dropped off her kids at school in Pennsylvania when everything hit a wall. Her marriage was falling apart, she'd been denied public housing, and life just felt impossible. So when 3 homeless hitchhikers spotted her crying in a park and asked her if she wanted to come with them, she basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Why the hell not?" And she left. She spent the next 11 years drifting through Florida, living in shelters, doing odd jobs, and staying off the radar until 2013 when she walked into a police station and said, "I'm Brenda Heist." Her reappearance wasn't met with any joy, and sadly, the life she'd walked out on had long since moved on without her. Sticking with people who committed and just kept going, the phrase cello scrotum sounds like a middle school joke, but it somehow made it into the British Medical Journal and stayed there for 35 years before anyone admitted it was made up. It all started in 1974 after a doctor published a letter about guitar nipple, a supposed condition caused by playing the instrument too enthusiastically. Suspecting it was a prank, husband and wife duo John and Dr. Elaine Murphy decided to keep the joke going. Elaine wrote a letter, John signed it, and just like that, cello scrotum was born. They claimed it came from a man who developed groin irritation while playing the cello. Decades later, they finally came clean, saying anyone who's ever seen a cello being played should have known it was physically impossible. Since we've just covered a fake condition, let's talk about the time Botox and lip fillers actually saved a woman's life. In early 2023, Adita Jucate, a dental nurse from Oxfordshire, was dropping weight fast, 22 pounds in just a few months, with zero effort. She blamed stress and her packed schedule and moved on. Then came her usual cosmetic touch-up. Right after getting lip fillers and Botox, her lips swelled, bruising followed, something that had never happened before, and her injector told her to get it checked out. A routine blood test turned into a hospital referral, and soon after, a diagnosis: chronic myeloid leukemia. Adita's now in remission, but doctors say that the reaction to her beauty treatment may have led to them catching the cancer just in time. And just when you thought things couldn't get weirder than Botox saving a life, the US government said, "Hold my grant money." Researchers at Northwestern spent more than $3 million in federal grant money watching hamsters punch each other in the face for science. The project, funded by the National Institutes of Health, studied how aggression works in rodents. Some hamsters were jacked up on steroids. Others were hopped up on cocaine. They were then tossed into tiny cages and, well, you can guess what happened next. They even tested whether experienced fighters were meaner than newbies. Spoiler, they were. And it led to a real academic paper titled "Prior Fighting Experiences Increases Aggression in Syrian Hamsters." It ran for over 20 years until animal rights groups stepped in and shut it down. Next up, a movie so long you could grow a beard, start a side hustle, and still have hours left to go. Released in 2012 and directed by Erica Magnuson and Daniel Anderson, Logistics clocks in at a ridiculous 51,420 minutes. That is just over 35 days and 17 hours. The film follows the life cycle of a pedometer, but in reverse. I know, sounds absolutely thrilling, right? It starts at the store where it was sold and traces every step back to the factory where it was made. Everything is shown in real time, including the pedometer being shipped from Asia. Granted, it's not exactly Oscar material, but it is the longest film ever made, so there's that. Let's wrap it all up with a club so bad at everything, they accidentally succeeded. The Not Terribly Good Club of Great Britain launched in 1976 thanks to journalist Stephen Pyle. Getting in was easy. You just had to prove you were terrible at something. Or, ideally, everything. Their meetings featured members showcasing their lack of skill in everyday activities, whether it was small talk, drawing, or anything in between. A few years later, Pyle published a book inspired by the club, The Incomplete Book of Failures. It highlighted standout moments of spectacular ineptitude, like the guy who thought New York was Rome for 2 full days, and a crossword puzzle that took someone 34 years to finish. But when the book hit shelves, with a membership form inside, things went too well. In just 2 months, 20,000 people signed up, which meant, of course, that the club had to shut down, because success wasn't part of the plan. And that's a wrap. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Or is there one we missed along the way? Drop it in the comments. I really want to hear the weirdest ones you got. I'm going to regret that. And if you want to spend more time with us, check out our related video, 25 Completely False Facts Everyone Still Believes. We've covered goldfish memory, missing person myths, and why everything you know about the Great Wall might be wrong. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. Like, share, comment, do all the fun stuff, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.